Okay, so first of all, let's answer it this way. The answer you're going to find will be of the Gospels, you'll find it in Matthew. You find in Matthew, and that's because Matthew, unlike the three other Gospel writers, use what's called fulfillment citations as a device. I'm going to say that again. The scholarly term is called a fulfillment citation, which means Matthew will say that what Jesus did or what happened to Jesus is not an accident, it's not arbitrary, but it's to fulfill what was written in the scripture. The author of the book of Matthew does that 11 times. And in each and every case, without exception, the fulfillment citation is without merit. And it's very plain that it's without merit. To those of you Christians, I know this is maybe hurtful to you, offensive to you. I say it to you with all the love of my heart. And I really, this is not about Tovia, please. I mean, some of you said some really wonderful things about me last night, and they're all true. But it is not, it's so not about me. It's so about Scripture. So these fulfillment citations are very disturbing. What are the most reckless fulfillment citations? We can go through Matthew chapter, just go through the first couple of chapters, you go through Matthew chapter 1. Clearly in chapter 1, we're introduced to Jesus in the first verse. This is this is Jesus Christ, son of David, son of Abraham. This is his genealogy, his chronology, is Matthew 1:1. And then once we are given from verse 2 through verse 16, a genealogy of 41 names linking really Joseph, not Jesus, to King David, because according to Matthew, Jesus was not related to Joseph. Joseph was not his father. We're told then that there are this series of 3:14 sets is all pointing to Jesus. 14 generations from Abraham to David, from David until the Babylonian exile, 14 generations. Now we just hit verse 11, and then from the carrying away into Babylon until Jesus is 14 generations. Okay, and that's verse 17. The reason why it would be important to the author of Matthew, and I don't think Matthew came up with 14 because I don't think he knew enough. So this is Matthew sort of collating a oral tradition that has developed over a rather long period of time. Matthew's written, let's say, 80, 85, so we're talking about a half a century after the crucifixion. So all this is a development. But David 14 was always a very important number because in Hebrew letters have a numerical value. Every Hebrew letter is also a number. So David, Daled Vav Daled, which is 464, equals 14. So the message is clear. Matthew wants you to know that it's not an accident that it's 14, 14, 14, pow, we got Jesus, that it's David, 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 and there's Jesus right there. Are you willing to accept him now in your life? Now, what Matthew had done is, how did he manage to do that? Because it isn't correct. In fact, if we're just to take that genealogy, Matthew actually stripped out a whole bunch of names. So in the second set of 14, we know that genealogy is very well known to us because we can go to Chronicles, First Chronicles, and we can see that. And we can see that, in fact, a whole bunch of people were taken out. 3 people were taken out. You know the famous Achaz, right? Well, Achaz had a father, and his father's name was Yotam. Right, and Yotam had a father named Uzziyahu. We all know that. Those are 2 great men. I mean, Yotam never sinned in his entire career. Never sinned. He's the only Davidic king that just never sinned. That's why we never heard of him. What are you going to write about him? He never sinned. Like, okay, this is, it's like he never. That's why no one ever heard of him. But he actually never sinned. Well, as it turns out, all those names, that means Achaz's grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-great-grandfather just stripped out. That means that middle set is not 14, but it's actually 17. So he stripped it out in order to get the 14 number. So this is not a mistake. Do you follow what I'm saying? Because mistakes happen. This is a first degree offense. It is premeditated. It was deliberately altered in order to make a theological point. Historical datum had been reshaped, changed in order to make a point. You follow? That's not just a mistake. That's a crime. Okay. Now the last set of generations, which should be 14, from Jaconia until Jesus, should be another 14 generations. These names are unknown to us because they're after the biblical period. It means we don't have a correlating text. So these are all unknown names once we get past the Davidic kings and their sons mentioned in the Bible. Once we leave there, we're suddenly encountering names that we don't know who these people are. We have no idea. But as it turns out, we're told that these are 14 generations. One generation is missing. So it's actually only 13 if you count it for yourself. And we're told that this period, we're told essentially these last 14, which actually are 13 generations, account for a period of from 612 BC to the year 1, let's just say, we're just making just year 1, make it easy, 600 years. Well, 600 years, and I brought this up in my debate with Dr. Craig Evans, 600 years, 14 generations, or, because I'll give him that extra generation that isn't there. Well, take out your calculator. We're supposed to believe that there were 14 generations in 600 years. If you do the division, it comes out that each generation is roughly 46 years. Women were in every one of those generations, the average child was born when a woman was 46 years old. Today that would be just quite a feat. That would be quite challenging. In the ancient world, people, the average expected lifespan in that part of the world was about 30 years old. Incidentally, the average expected life expectancy for an American in the year 1900, for an American in the first world, in the year 1900, 115 years ago. Does anyone know what was the average like? Now it's somewhere around 80. What was it in the year 1900? It was 42. 42 here in America, in the United States. That was in the ancient world. It was 25, 26. How many of you here would not be alive if there was no such thing as an antibiotic? How many of you here would not be alive if we didn't have any medication? Yeah, it's almost all of us. We maybe 1 or 2 people, and that's it. If you study history, that's why you read about these people in the ancient world. They had their mother had 11 brothers and sisters, and only 3 of them survived to adulthood. You're telling me 14 generations for 600 years. So that's clearly been changed, altered. And then what we have is Matthew telling us that Jesus is being born to a virgin was not just a unique event, but it was a fulfillment of prophecy made by Isaiah in chapter 7, verse 14. We go back to the original, to the book of Isaiah, we find that in fact it's not talking about a virgin, it's not talking about a Messiah, it's not talking about an event that will happen in the future. It wouldn't even make sense if it was talking about what will happen in the future. So that is a deliberate change of the text. Then it gets very shocking because when we get into chapter 2 of the infancy narrative, particularly we have a very disturbing story. It doesn't sound disturbing, but you'll understand why it is we have people from the east, astronomers from the east, we're told, who are following a star. Star is moving, and somehow it's moving slow enough for them to actually follow the star. And I didn't mean to be funny. It's just natural. No, I didn't mean to be funny. Matthew really does have in mind, this is important, a magical star. And I didn't mean that in a demeaning way, because that's what Matthew has in mind. Because a magical star, a star that you could see, that you can move, that will stop, will start, will hover. You can know what house is standing over. You know what the star is doing, and you can follow the star. And they're following the star. For whatever reason, they're trying to find the Messiah. And they come to Jerusalem, to Herod's palace, to inquire where the Messiah would be born. And Herod, he wouldn't know that, but his priests, his scribes, the rabbis, they sure would know, and he inquires of them. And they tell him, well, certainly the Messiah is supposed to be born in Bethlehem, chapter 2, verse 6. And at that point, and there's a verse for it. In Micah chapter 5, verse 1 in a Jewish Bible, verse 2 in a Christian Bible. But that's a massive change of what the text says. The text says, basically, I'm paraphrasing, that although Bethlehem seems to be small and insignificant, out of you will come forth a ruler that will, they'll rule and so on. And so the text, if you stop midway through that verse, it really does appear to say that the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem. It really does. If you strip the last part of Micah 5:1 or 5:2 away, if you remove it, the text in the natural reading says that is conveying that the Messiah is to be born in Bethlehem. But the end of the verse contains a modifier. What is the relationship between, not the word Messiah is not used there, but it's a ruler. What is the relationship between that ruler and Bethlehem? The connection, like, when you make, what blessing do you make when you eat bread? How do you say the Hebrew? Say it loud. Hamotzi. Okay, good. Hamotzi. What does hamotzi mean? Who brings forth, right? So umoitsoisav, same root, and his root, his connection. How does the ruler come from Beis Lechem, from Bethlehem? What is the connection? Okay, so then it says mikedem imei olam. It's not him, but it's mikedem from ancient times, from days of old, which means he's not from Bethlehem, but from an ancient point there is a connection. What's that connection? That is, King David was born in Bethlehem. So the problem is, the problem for Matthew is you can't quote Micah 5:1 or 2 in the English Bible in its entirety. You have to leave off which part of the text? You have to leave off part 2, because that's the modifier. It's explaining to you what's the connection. And he does it. If you go to Matthew chapter 2, verse 6, it doesn't say, and is going forth as from ancient times from everlasting, or whatever, from ancient times, from the old days. It doesn't say that. It actually says, and he will be a shepherd over Israel. What? Where did that come in? So he actually removes this is very deliberate. This is not someone who made a mistake. He takes it out, and I always say to you, look it up for yourself. So he puts in another text that would then hide, would very easily just hide what the original text says, the critical part. You follow? It's why people say, how do you have the patience? Well, thank you. You have so much patience to be a Christian. I love them. I feel so sorry. I feel terrible. They're just, this is what they're reading. And frankly, most Christians just don't go and look it up. Or they don't have the patience just to read through Micah and just read to the end of the verse. And then go and look up Matthew. And all you have to do is that. Just go from both sides. There's a string in that Bible, right? And you say, it's a cool string. What am I supposed to do with this? It's like supposed to pick up shortwave. The string is great. Put the string in one place and just switch it, and it's right there. That's deliberate. And then what happens then is that the story continues in chapter 2. It's a short infancy narrative. So the astrologers, non-Jews, these are presumably pagans from Assyria, let's just say, they go, oh, great. The star then moves on and then goes to Bethlehem and finds Jesus' home. Remember, this is not Luke. Jesus' family lives in Bethlehem. So that's why there's no barn, there's none of that stuff in Matthew. Matthew doesn't know about barns and mangers and so on. You won't find it in chapter 2 of Matthew. And the star, it doesn't know which house it is. Magi he says he lives in Houston. Well, great, what does that mean? So the star then hovers over the house of Jesus. And then these three wise men, whatever these astronomers, whatever, they go and what do? They go in to see Jesus, they bring gifts and so on, and they worship him. It's very clear, okay? And then they are warned not to go back, because Herod wants to kill the baby. Do not return back in the same direction you came from, but take a circuitous route so as not to give Herod the information of where that baby is, because Herod's going to want to now kill the baby, okay? That's pretty straightforward. What's the problem with this story? What is the what is odd about the story? The problem with asking that is it may be hard to figure because there's so many things that are strange, but there's something that really is completely unnecessary in the story. So yes, we have the misquote, but there's something really strange about the story. What is strange about the story? What's wrong with the story? The story could fancifully work, but there's one part of which, if you were reading this as a novel, if you're reading it as fiction, see, the problem is Christians are reading fiction as though it's nonfiction. But what's wrong with the story? The story has a defect in it.
Why would they go to Jerusalem?
What?
Why would the star take them to Jerusalem?
To find out where the Messiah is born. Let me just play this through with you. You're in the right direction, so they find out where the Messiah was supposed to be born.
But why didn't the star just take them directly to?
Because they had to find out where the Messiah would be born. Don't stop. You're right. Just give me the knach. Go ahead. So she's you all answer your question. So I'm just playing this through the star because the text is very clear. They needed to find out what city would the Messiah be born in. So that's why they had to stop off at Herod's palace. What's your response?
Why didn't the star just take them to Bethlehem?
Because the star had to find out.
Oh, the star
had to find out where the Messiah would be born. Okay. Is that answer satisfying? Okay. What is wrong with that? You're right there. You're right there. So what is wrong with that? What is wrong with what's missing here? There's a piece missing. You're right there at the edge. What's missing? Okay. Again, they're told that the Messiah is born in the city of Bethlehem, as foretold by Micah. Let's just forget about the mistranslation. The star then starts moving, and they follow the star southward towards Bethlehem. We know that, and stops over Jesus' home. And they therefore know where Jesus is born, where the baby Messiah Savior is. What's the problem? What is interesting here? Something doesn't make sense here? It means that your original question is correct. How did the star know where Jesus' home is, where the baby is born? That means they were not given that kind of information. They're just told Houston. They're not told the corner of, I don't know, Kennedy, Northwest Highway, whatever you got here. I have no idea. Probably have a Spring Street somewhere. So, do you? I bet you do. Worse. Okay. So, that means the star knew with precision the home, GPS, and actual address. That means the star had information that the Herod did not have and his advisors didn't have. Therefore, there was no need to stop off at Herod's place. Because the star clearly knew where Jesus was born. The Messiah was supposed to be born. Why did they have to stop off in Jerusalem first? It was completely unnecessary. Because clearly the star had more information, as were presented, than the scribes and Pharisees had who were advising Herod and the priests. Right? Do you get that? Why stop off? You could have written the story of just these wise men going down to Bethlehem, just a straight shot, avoiding Herod, avoiding the problem, creating a story of the killing of the innocents. Of course, it just never happened. There's no, Herod would have killed every child in Bethlehem or anything like that. No, but they're trying to do that because they're trying to have, remember I told you last night in Matthew, Jesus is the new Moses. So why did he do that? This is really, so the one is to have the Herod killing all the babies, like Pharaoh would kill all the children, and Jesus is fleeing death, which Moses did. That's one reason, but there's a much more ominous reason for that. And that is that it is juxtaposing the Jewish reaction to the Messiah and the Gentile reaction to the Messiah. It really is, this is quite odious. This chapter is a setup. And the setup is the following. It's look at how what the Jews do when they discover the Messiah and what the Gentiles do. Well, when the Gentiles discover who the Messiah is, they bring presents and they worship him. And they do everything possible to protect him. In fact, they leave Bethlehem going back home, back east, wherever that may be, using a completely different road not to alert Herod and all the Jews. Okay? Okay, so that's how Gentiles respond when they encounter Jesus. Well, how do Jews respond? They want to kill him. The leader of the Jews, Herod, the king of the Jews, literally finds out, oh, yes, the Messiah is born in Bethlehem. Let's go kill him. And if we can't find him, we'll just kill every boy born in Bethlehem. So that's the setup. And this is the setup this sets the stage for what is going to happen in the Passion narratives, where we are introduced to Pontius Pilate, and someone we only meet once in the Christian Bible, and that's the wife of Pontius Pilate. Two Gentiles standing against a horde of Jews who want to kill Jesus, who want him crucified, who are saying, we take this upon ourselves and on our children. And now, in stark contrast, we have Pontius Pilate, who washes his hands of this and wants nothing to do with this. He's innocent of his blood, and his wife is saying, I had a dream, and I know that this man is innocent. So we have the Gentiles, their reaction to Jesus, that means Pilate and his wife, they want to save Jesus from crucifixion, but the Jewish hordes who have power, because they control everything, they're demanding the crucifixion of Jesus, and they're taking the full responsibility for the crucifixion upon themselves. It's the Gentile response, the Jewish response. And that's what's really happening. So what we're doing is looking for patterns. It's not, ha, 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 Matthew made a mistake. That's really not very important here. What is very important is there's something very nefarious that's taking place. The consequence of these kind of alterations, we would have to pay the price in Jewish blood. Jewish communities are wiped out because of these passages. But that's what's really happening in here now. Jim Long, my dear friend, Lycatcher Productions, and the man who filmed my debate with Dr. Craig Evans, and I love you, man. What's going on?
I was just going to point out, and it's also, if people think it's history, it's revisionist history, because what we know really about the real Pilate, he was nothing like this compassionate soul that the Bible paints him to be.
Right.
He's a pretty bloodthirsty guy.
He was a psychopath. In our sources for Pontius Pilate, we do have some Jewish sources, certainly, but it's the Roman historian. The man was a complete psychopath, an absolute maniac by every. He was like just some crazy. He was evil. He was wanted to just kill people. I mean, Josephus. Everyone described him the same. He was absolutely, was just wanted to kill people and in a blink with it. So this is not at all the picture of him, but it's the picture that the church will paint. And it will do so it's very easy to track this. One is that the earlier the New Testament text is written, the more culpable Pontius Pilate is, or his culpability is somewhere near where the Jewish culpability is. And as we go to the later texts, it becomes more anti-Jewish, and therefore the responsibility from Pontius Pilate or the Romans recedes and evaporates, whereas the responsibility and the culpability of the Jews becomes heightened and magnified. So if you look at Mark's Passion narrative, it's true that Pilate is not sure, but he's going along with it. We don't really have any of these texts. I wash my hands of this, and I want and his wife coming out. None of that's happening in Mark. But once you get to Matthew, you have what I just heard now. You can see the anti-Jewish movement is very, very clear, and also the culpability from the Romans for the Roman part of it is receding and evaporating very, very, very quickly. And we'll see that, of course, in Luke as well. In John, it's completely outrageous, because in John, if you look carefully at the text, as far as the Synoptic Gospels go, the Roman soldiers then take Jesus away to be crucified upon the demands of the Jews. But if you see in John, in fact, the Romans hand Jesus over to the Jews to be crucified. The Jews are the ones that actually take him away. It's the only gospel that will do that. And in fact, when Jesus is having a conversation with Pontius Pilate, in chapter 19, they're actually having a conversation, unlike in Mark, where Jesus just doesn't say a word. You say it, there's nothing. Jesus reassures Pontius Pilate that you are not responsible for what's happening here, because you don't really know what you're doing. And it's therefore those who handed me over to you, they are the ones who bear the sin. You'll only find that in John. So in John, it is the Jews. Absolutely, the Jews are completely culpable. So just look at the trajectory that's happening. So, this is painting the picture. Most of you here have some strong familiarity with the Christian Bible and the Christian movement. People believe in Jesus not because of Paul. They believe in him because of the stories in the Gospels. Never forget that. Okay? If you want to ask people why, what does it come down to? Why do you love Jesus? It's the storytelling that is so powerful. Christians are influenced by these stories, not by doctrines found in Romans. Okay? If you don't know this, I'm telling you this. They are not Christians because of something in the book of Ephesians. That is not why they're Christians. They're very impressed with Paul, but it is the storytelling in the Gospels that convinces people to love Jesus because they can identify with him. And he's the one man who will never betray them, will never sleep around on them, and never turn their back on them. And some of you have been betrayed in your life. Some of you sitting here have a sister or a high school friend who turned her back on you. Or you have a father that didn't do what was right. Right? So people who you love betrayed you in your life. But the one thing about Jesus is he'll never betray you. He's everything you want to be. So incidentally, thank God, other Gospels, which almost made it into the canon, didn't, because we actually have later Gospels, like the Gospel of Peter or the Epistle of Barnabas. Those are later. Those even there, the Jews are, it's even worse. If it could be worse, it's worse. It is, but those books were considered at some stage by some of the church fathers should be in the New Testament. They ultimately, it was decided they shouldn't. But the later you go, the more anti-Jewish the books become. So would be some tampering right there. And then you have, of course, Paul tampering with texts. Paul changing Isaiah 59. So it just goes on and on. I mean, there isn't, I'm not interested in silly mistakes. Not interested in Acts 7, 14, and 15, where Stephen is made to say that the patriarchs are buried in Shechem, which is not correct. They're buried in Hebron. That was just a silly mistake. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in what could we learn from these things.